is there kind of some like overarching theme or message that you're really passionate about, that you really feel like people need to know more in this industry?
I believe really strongly, like investing in people. So really keeping up that, making your best people really valued and appreciated, and continue to invest in that, like training and development, and really kind of honing in on the people stuff. I would say just really looking at what makes a great work environment. You know, we know it's not a 9 to 5 in any way, shape or form, but you know, and I would say that's a real key to their success.
Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we document and share best practices around owning, operating, and managing world-class wedding venues.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the Venue RX. On this show, we are all about making a difference for the better in your business. And we talk, of course, all about venues here on the show. We also talk to venue owners, people who own businesses, wedding businesses, and professionals who are doing everything from marketing to sales to accounting, everything that you need to make your business successful here in the wedding and events industry. So I'm really excited today to speak with someone who is a venue expert, but she's actually located in the UK. So we're going to get a little bit of a different perspective today on the venue industry. And I'm excited about that because I think when you hear different perspectives, you hear what's working in different parts of the world, maybe what's not working, different trends and things like that. You really get a unique perspective and maybe even fire up, those parts of your brain that get you thinking a little bit outside the box. So without further ado, Kelly Chandler, thank you so much for being on the Venue RX.
Oh, thank you very much for inviting me, Jonathan. It's a real pleasure to be here. So I look forward to this time together.
Well, I'm looking forward to it as well. Like we were saying just before we got started recording, I've been aware of you for some time now, just kind of seeing the content that you put out, and you're I think prolific in the different places that you are in the industry. Where
I like that, prolific.
Yes, where you're working with people and serving the industry, and so I'm excited. But let's talk about this. Because we were kind of there right before we got started recording. There are some unique differences in the venue industry in the UK and in the United States. And we were talking about some of those all the way down to verbiage. So I think this would be kind of a fun place to start. What are some of the differences that you've come across, in terms of maybe language used, styles, things of that nature?
Sure. Well, I'll start with the language because I might as well put that one out there because I'm bound to use slightly different language as we talk today a little bit. I know we have certain terminology in the UK, wedding terminology. We talk about wedding suppliers. So, our caterers, florists are our extended teams. You guys talk vendors. So we have that. We talk wedding show rounds or viewings, and I think you guys talk more tour. Am I right in thinking it's
absolutely.
All these things? And then of course the classic one, we call them inquiries with an E, and you guys have inquiries with an I. I think I've got that right. So, there's a few little word things. Yeah.
Explain that one a little bit, because that one's a kind of an important one. You don't want inquiries in the UK with an I, correct?
Yeah. So we're inquiries with an E. So it's interesting.
But doesn't inquiries, like we say it, mean like a police investigation? Or isn't it like a different meaning if you were going to say it?
So we will mean it as inquiries like a wedding inquiry, like someone's inquiring about their wedding. So they are coming to, they're raising their hand to say, hey, we're getting married. We like the look at your venue. So yeah, but yeah, you're right. Obviously it can be the other way, can't it? Like conducting an inquiry.
No, I was talking to someone who runs a marketing agency. I think he's from Scotland, but he was saying something like inquiry, like if you have an inquiry.
Oh, yes. You're right. You know what? We have an inquiry. So we would have, you're absolutely right. We might have what's called a public inquiry. So that might be when something pretty major has happened that, shouldn't have happened. And there's, like, for example, we have a public inquiry about the global pandemic. So, So it can be,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's with an I.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Key differences. No
Yeah.
inquiries with an I in the UK. No, don't want those.
Exactly. It's fascinating, isn't it? But
Yeah.
fundamentally, despite the different language, there are a lot of similarities. So yeah, I suppose moving on to the slight differences of venue type and things, would that be useful to, because there's
Yeah.
something,
Well, I'm curious.
yeah.
And Kelly, really quick, I'm curious, do you, in the UK there, as you have experienced the US market, talk to US educators, things like that, could you just comment on that really quick, like similarities that you see and then just dramatic differences if those do exist?
Yeah, I guess first of all, similarities, actually, despite the fact that we might have, thousands of miles apart and seemingly many differences, actually lots of the things are remarkably similar, from, the ups and downs of trends of customer buying and, when the industry is kind of on a bit of an up and when it's having a little bit of a wobbly moment. Some of those things seem to be very similar, and in terms of the customer, the wishes, what they look for, what they love, are really very similar. You guys tend to be a little further ahead. We tend to follow in many ways. Although, that's changed and that happens a lot faster these days. And I've been in weddings for 22 years and, there were things happening in the US that took a lot longer to come to the UK back then. Things have got much quicker now. Obviously with the, when I started my first business, there was no social media. So, it's a very different space, but I think fundamentally, it's a people business and people obviously are always the greatest joy and the greatest challenge, and always evolving. So, I think, we are fundamentally pretty much the same people. Yes, with different wishes and different things, but, weddings all being hospitality and the kind of wanting to create a special occasion. I think there's lots and lots of similarities. Some of the formats in the buildings might be different and the locations. And I talk to lots of my UK venue owners and they have huge envy at some of the kind of ability to create spaces and build venues in the way that you guys often can in the US, that we find more difficult here in the UK with sort of planning restrictions and just much less space, basically. So we tend to renovate and kind of make good or renew on what we have. There isn't so much opportunity for new build, so much from a venue point of view.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask about that because from a landscape of the different types of venues that there are out there, we'll have rural venues that are like someone's barn, that they decided, hey, this has been in our family for a long time. They've had this dream of owning a wedding venue. Yeah. Boom, we've got a barn. Maybe it's not zoned. And so they're going to create that. I would imagine in the UK, maybe having a bit more, constriction. Obviously, there's much more history there. There's like, the space, the land has kind of all been used or kind of allocated into different things. Are there rural venues? Are there barn venues? Are there new venues coming up? Or is it primarily kind of established venues that are just being bought and sold? And if you're getting into the wedding industry, you're buying into a business rather than starting something from scratch.
It's interesting. I mean, actually, a huge number of rural venues. Of course, we have city venues in the UK, but actually the most popular type of wedding location is the rural venue. So over the last, I would say, 10 to 20 years, there's been a huge number of barn renovations. So they would be the older style barns. So they might be Tudor barns. They could be 500-year-old barns. They might be 200-year-old barns. And a lot of them with the old beams and the real character. Those kind of buildings have become super popular. They've become probably the leading style of wedding venue in the UK. So very rural. Some of them more rustic. Increasingly, that's become quite a sophisticated market. So the renovations have become, really quite high end in some places and, some really cool sort of architectural things going on to kind of keep the heritage, but also create something that serves a modern purpose. So there's often that balance, between what's allowed, because some of these buildings are protected, grade 1, grade 2 listed, all of these kind of things which we have to factor in. So there's a big barn market, and we have a lot of country houses, which will be typically would not have been an event venue or a wedding venue, but they are, manor houses. They might be castles. They might be, very large family homes that are quite heritage. They are very popular wedding venues too. So we do have some newer locations that pop up, and actually over the last 5 to 10 years in particular, I would say lots more what I call outdoor venues. So teepee tent type locations, some more temporary or semi-permanent structure kind of locations set up in beautiful, again, rural settings. So that's really been on the increase in the last few years. So we still have new venues coming on, whether they are, so there is a lot of movement in the market, and, there are way more venues now in the UK than 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So,
yeah. So it sounds like there's some similarity there as well, because I know 10 years ago, well, and specifically, I think 10 years ago, way less venues. Now I think we've kind of in the US here, especially in popular markets, even some suburban areas outside of most major cities, outside of Chicago, outside of Dallas, certainly outside of Austin, you get so many venues that have popped up, and there's a lot of saturation, which creates a very competitive environment. And so are you seeing that in the UK as well?
We are definitely in certain areas more than others. There's certain, we have counties in the UK, and you have your states, don't you? But, we have our counties, and there are certain counties that definitely have seen a real surge in venues, and, it's a really competitive space. So, it's, that's a big piece of work I often do when I'm supporting, and end of the day, it's a competitive space. So the venues have to be better and better, and have to constantly evolve. And that's the work that you and I do, isn't it? So,
yep, it's true. How far is it typical for a couple to drive for their venue? Just on average, I know it varies based on, but is there kind of like an average couples driving distance-wise?
That's actually changed quite a lot. It used to be, people would be very local with their weddings, so they might, be within 30 minutes of their home, which is pretty close by. But that's definitely increased. More and more couples will go further. They will go 2-3 hours drive, which, bear in mind, that gets you quite far in the UK. I know not so far in US, but people will travel more, but I think that's also tied into the fact that weddings have become very multi-day. So overnight accommodation is a really big trend that we've had for quite a while now, and still increases. People want to do the night before, the day of, the overnight, maybe the brunch the next day, or the pool party. Not everybody, but there's an increasing sort of popularity for that, which kind of means they're more willing to travel further for the right place. So, still fairly local. Most people would be within a couple of hours of home, but yeah.
The multi-day experience, I think I've definitely seen a rise in that. Here, it's absolutely people looking for a weekend or a kind of a full experience, lodging, wanting to stay with their family. Are you, one of the things I'm also seeing is smaller guest counts. Not in every market, certainly. I know there's certainly venues that have, stayed 200 plus in terms of the guest counts, but are you seeing any movement, either an increase or decrease in guest counts? I'm also curious about budgets. So like guest counts and budgets, are you seeing any wiggle room there?
Yeah, I mean, it does vary hugely, again, regionally. But overall, there does seem to be a slight reduction of guest count. I mean, bear in mind, our sort of UK average guest count has tended to be around the 100 guests, which would probably be smaller than your averages anyway. But that's kind of dipped a little bit lower. But the experience I think that's mainly being felt is people are spending roughly the same budget, but they're lowering the guest count to get more value for that, or for that money to be spent in the areas that maybe they consider more important, or, you know, in a number of cases, obviously the cost of things has gone up. So they're trying to use that budget and look at where they can just hit that budget, and they're cutting people rather than the experiences, or, you know, that they want to keep all the styling and all the things. So that's what most of my clients are seeing. Yeah.
That's crazy that it's just crazy to see how it's almost like this perfect storm of social media. We're like more in touch than ever, but we're almost like less connected, like on a deeply personal level. Simultaneously, things are getting more expensive. The budgets are kind of staying the same, but the costs of things are getting higher. So it's kind of like there's this pressure, and how does a client deal with that? Well, a reduction in guest count, you know, is kind of the way to get there.
It is tough times, because they, you know, the as you say, the social media and the wonderful things that are out there, you know, the choice, the selection, the phenomenal quality, but of course it's coming at a price. And it's, I think the couple's budgets are not moving up in the same way as the expectations are moving up. And I know that's been a bit of a theme. You're talking about the sort of business trends with venues. It's definitely a theme of couples, you know, if it be needing more support, needing more hand-holding, needing more understanding of making their budget work, all of those kind of things.
Let's get into that. I'd love to talk about Gen Z, or Gen Z, as you say, across the pond.
Yes, because the Z and the Z.
Yes. Could we? But before we do that, I'm curious. Give me a little backstory on you. Like, how did you get in this industry in the beginning? Why weddings? You know, to begin with.
Okay. Well, I'll put it out there first of all. I'm definitely not a Gen Z. I think you've worked that one out. I'm going to claim myself proudly as a Gen X here. Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, how did I get into the wedding industry? So. I actually started off leaving university, leaving as a student, age 22. I had no clue really what I wanted to go into, other than that I studied languages. I loved travel, and I was pretty good with people. So I went into communications agency within the pharmaceutical industry, actually. And that gave me really good project management experience. I moved around a little bit within travel, organizing conferences and corporate events. So that was my sort of take into events. I had this crazy idea written on the back of a napkin, so to speak, literally, with a good friend of mine back in 2003. I had the experience of corporate project management, but I wanted to do something more personal. So we decided that we were going to set up a wedding planning business. So we duly did that, age 28, with a lot of passion and enthusiasm. I will be the first to admit, not a lot of business knowledge. It was a steep learning curve. But, you know, we worked hard. I continued that business and grew that business that took a small boutique team of 5 through the sort of early 2000s and run that business for 15 years, working with couples to plan their predominantly UK-based weddings. I had lots of US clients actually who would be coming into the UK, usually sort of couples with some connection to the UK, either, you know, family or studying or whatever. So loved working with lots of Americans there, which is great. Planning weddings in a lot of often country houses and rural locations. So it was around 10 years ago now. I was still running that planning business. I found myself being asked by a couple of my really good venue owners or venue senior team people, the team leaders. You know, Kelly, you're really well connected. You know who's who. Can you come and help us? We want to grow our business. We want to grow our bookings. Can you come and give us some advice? And to be really honest with you, it was not a business I was quite happy planning, but actually I did a really good job for a couple of country estates who loved my strategy that I suggested. implemented it and saw some fantastic results over the next few years to come. And I loved it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It came at a good time for me personally to change things up. And I decided to focus on the venue consulting. So for the last sort of 8 years, that's been my primary focus, mix of consultancy and sales training. So yeah, switching my client completely from couples to venues. So that's my, yeah.
The B2B switch, or the B2C switch rather, to the B2B.
Exactly. And I now find as well, I started serving the venues very much from a marketing and sales perspective, and it still very much is. But as I've got to know my clients, and I've worked with some of my venues now for 7, 8, 9 years, I think some of them, it's very much about the owner and the senior leadership team. And I very much have evolved it into an element of coaching and accountability and all those kind of things as well. So I've added that sort of training to my repertoire, and it's very much the person or the people behind the business as much as the mechanics. So I love it. Yeah. I very much love my clients, I suppose.
That's wonderful. And this industry is it is interesting because the people do matter so much.
Yeah.
It's weird because it's almost like there is a product element to it. Like you have this venue, you need to make sure the venue's good, but it's very much a service. And if you don't have a team, an ownership group, operators on the ground, if you don't have like this group of people that are committed to the success of the couple, and even vendors or suppliers, right?
Yeah.
Who are committed to that success, you'll struggle.
Totally.
8 years in venue consulting. It's a very interesting time to be in this sort of space, because you had about 2 to 3 years prior to COVID. Yes, 4 years maybe.
Yes.
Something like that.
It's
2025.
Yeah,
yes.
Sort of 2015 to for 4 or 5 years. Yeah, we try and erase some of that time, don't we?
Yes, shrink that. Yeah. Is what kind of major shifts have you seen? Not less like weddings in general, but just kind of venue specifically. Could you give me a little bit of that timeline of kind of pre-COVID, what that looked like, the bookings that were coming in, the kind of general sentiment, and then now, how have we developed? And I know there's been a generational shift as well of who's getting married at these venues. So could you comment on that?
Yeah, definitely. I would say from the business leader or business owner perspective, there was definitely, if I look at 2018, 2019, that time, it was all about more and greater volume and the greater number of weddings. Obviously 2020, all came crashing down for everyone and for that period of time. And then there was for a lot of people a time of reflection as well as everything else chaotic going on. I think what I've noticed, not for all, but for some of my clients, is they took that time to rethink. And in some of those cases, they've kind of come out the other side. They came out with a bumper 2022, of course, a boom time. But a lot of them then chose to slightly reposition. In some cases, that's been actually looking more at, where is the profitability? Is it in volume, or is it actually in a kind of slightly less is more? So some of those have actually sort of changed up how they've offered weddings, going from, a wedding every day to kind of multi-day, or, offering 2 or 3 night packages or things like that to sort of change up their business. And then, of course, they've had other clients who've we have quite a lot of, as a trend in the UK, we've certainly seen more groups, so exclusive use wedding venue groups popping up. So they are very much about the volume. So we've almost got the two, I'd say we've got almost like a polarization. We've got the businesses that are actually consciously kind of changing it up and maybe keeping it smaller for lots of reasons. And then we've actually got the opposite with some actually quite large groups forming, which we didn't have before in the wedding space. We obviously always had in hotels, but not in exclusive use venues. So that's definitely something I feel like the pandemic stood in the middle of that and kind of, has changed that.
Do you have venue management companies? I'm curious about the mix of what the industry is like here. Obviously, there's owner operated, someone has their own property. But are there management groups in the UK? Are there what does the ownership mix look like of wedding venues?
Yeah, there is. And actually, we didn't have so much of that. That's definitely on the rise in the UK. The venue management, hence the sort of group. We didn't have that really very much pre-pandemic. That's definitely a trend. It tended to be the independent or the one-off, or whoever the ownership was. It might be family ownership, or but it's definitely become more venue management. Whether that's come from a lot of the operators will come from the sort of catering background and become that sort of caterer operator. So, yeah.
Do you think, what's your take on that? Do you think that's a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What's your experience going with it?
I'll have to be careful on this one, Jonathan, because this is your, your space. Do you know what? I would say it's a really good thing for the industry because it professionalizes standards, and it allows for investment and growth and all of those positive things, I would say, for the industry as a whole. I would say for me personally, I love working with the independent business, the kind of perhaps the smaller entity that's just me and my sort of playing to my strengths and what have you. But I would say I think it's good to have both. You know what? I think it's really good to have the whole selection, because, in the same way as couples choose hugely different things for their weddings, I think it's great to have a real range of different businesses and how they run and are set up. And, but ultimately, I think a move to groups is a move towards professionalism. I think we sort of struggled with the identity of weddings. Sometimes within the event sphere, it's never been taken as seriously as other parts of the events industry. Certainly felt that in the UK. So yeah, I think this is a positive step overall.
Yeah, I am probably less of a fan of management companies than you would think. Owning one myself.
Yes.
And the reason for that is I think it's almost like a necessary evil. There are some incredible benefits. I can was talking with my clients, I can say with certainty that when I hire a full-time person to just focus on social media, and all that person does is focus on social media, we are going to be more competitive. And, if we're running a social media race against an owner operator who also has 9,000 things on their plate, and then they also need to be good at social media, or they have to be good at managing a social media person. We're going to have the competitive advantage there. But what we lose, and I think is the heart of this industry, is that personalization, that touch. And weddings are so enmeshed in that. And I guess the crusade that I'm on, let's call it.
I like that we're on a crusade.
Yes. Is I want to find a way to make, still with our management company, but I want to find a way to make it really personal. So how do we make it very unique, very personal, very bespoke and custom, but then also underpinned and kind of girded and supported by professionalism and by some of those kind of SOPs and some of those things. So it's kind of a personal thing I'm trying to work on in our company.
And it's a classic thing, isn't it? I'm quite known actually in the UK for some of the audiences I speak with. I always talk about people being just as important as, let's say, the bricks and mortar, the building. And I've banged this drum for literally 10 years, and I always will. And actually, I think and particularly in these times where obviously we have all, so much automation and obviously so many conversations around AI and all of the pros and cons and all the rest of it, I still very much, it is that people and emotional connection and that rapport building and all of those kind of things that matter, I would say, even more in weddings. but we need to embrace, obviously. And we do, I think it's the magic spot, isn't it, between using technology and automations and processes and SOPs. And that is super important. And I do a lot of work with my clients on making sure that we're bringing those all up to where they need to be. But without losing the people. And it's, I wish I had the complete magic wand. It's a work in progress, like you and your crusade. Yeah.
I wish when you find that magic wand, just let me know.
I'll let you know. But I'll trademark it, right?
There you go. I'll license it from you. Help me understand a little bit about this kind of generational shift that we've seen. And, with the 8 years in kind of the venue side, but, obviously, 25 years, 23 years, something like that in the industry. What in terms of consumer behavior, buyer behavior, are you seeing shift? And have you seen like a radical shift? Has it been gentle and gradual? Give me a little bit of understanding. What does this Gen Z look like? Sure. How are they buying?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'll take it back a little bit further than that, if you don't mind, just for a second.
Yeah.
I think these generational shifts, I've seen them happen in the wedding market before because, I'm really fascinated by psychology and the generations and everything. And I remember it quite clearly, 2008, well, obviously there was a pretty turbulent period in the world at that time. And that was the kind of age when a lot of millennials were becoming the predominant wedding couple. If we look at the average age of couples marrying, it was the millennials who were kind of getting married around that time. And there was so much, obviously, turbulence in the world at that time, aside from weddings. But there was big shift then, and that was a real kind of, social media really coming to the fore and all of those kind of things. So, and I feel like we're in a similar time now. Interestingly, also a very turbulent time in the world. But we're now switching over from those millennials to those Gen Zs becoming, the oldest Gen Z's sort of 28. So very much wedding age. That's just the first point I would say. But you were asking me about the changes that we're seeing with the new generation and Gens. Of course, I'm calling them Gen Zs, and I know it's the Gen Zs. And my daughter is 13, and she is British, but she calls them Gen Zs because she's watching a lot of you guys on YouTube. So it's even changing. Anyway, I guess in terms of the different kind of requirements and needs and what have you. I mean, I have this conversation with so many clients every day, people saying, look, the typical sales techniques, they're not working with these guys. They are really savvy and they are really switched on, and they're really, they know their stuff and they do their research. And, not that any of my clients are trying to, pull the wool over anyone's eyes or, or be anything less than genuine, but they're kind of saying that the stuff we used to do, they're really kind of pushing back on this and questioning it and all of the rest. So I think we have a very savvy bunch of customers, which is great. Very wanting so much information up front, wanting to research prolifically across, multiple platforms. And obviously the challenge for venues is to be ever present in all of these places, and still manage some sleep, So hence, needing support with that. And I think the big shift, I don't know if you encountered this in the US, but certainly it's the talk of the town in the UK this last couple of years in particular, is the need for transparency, the need for being really upfront, particularly with pricing, with packaging, with what they're getting. It used to be the norm that you would kind of, entice people, show them all these wonderful things, and then you would get them in the door. Now, unless you're transparent with your pricing and it's out there, then they're off, they're going somewhere else. So there's, that's been something that's very much, we see as a Gen Z trend, particularly.
Kelly, I have a question on this. It's something that just fascinates me, and it is something I'm consistently curious about. So how much do you think the venue attractiveness matters, like the aesthetic. And let me say it this way. If you had a gorgeous, stunning, just beautiful venue, maybe the owner put millions and millions of pounds into it. Maybe they, it's just stunning, beautiful, gorgeous. But they didn't have a good team. There was not transparent pricing. The staff was rude. So the experience was bad. But the beauty of the space was so beautiful. Is that venue space still going to be successful? And then vice versa, if you have a venue that is not as beautiful, but they have the best systems, the transparent pricing, the incredible team, is that venue going to do good, or can it never outweigh like the physical beauty? What's your take on that?
Do you know, it's tricky, but what I would say, and I experience this all the time in the one-to-one work I do with my clients, is, often, ultimately it comes down to the marketing and the promotional side. And actually what I tend to find with some of the clients I work with, they have the most stunning property, fantastic team, it's all there. But if the digital marketing isn't up to scratch, then they struggle, because to get people in, you've got to have the kind of wow and the great social media presence, the great digital presence. So I'd say that thing has got to be right, because you just won't get people to even experience the next thing with these guys. So which can be hard, because I know I've had some clients who are like, wow, you are just, what a product, but people aren't even getting to experience that product unless they, and increasingly that's the case. The decision is being made from the TikTok, from the web, from the photo shoot, from whatever. And if that's not on point, then that's where it stops. So I guess that would be that said, if the experience in person is not going to match up with that, then you're not necessarily going to get them over the line at that point. So you might get them in the door, but, actually if there's a staff issue or staff are rude or again, I'm a big believer, it's an emotional purchase. You've got to have a good people connection. And I think, the sweet spot is using technology where that can do its thing, using AI, using automation, but, putting the best people in to kind of build the emotional connection, which can't be, which gets people booking, even when it might be a little bit above their budget, even then it might not be, they might not have expected to spend quite so much, but they just want it, the intangible.
Are you finding people make decisions based off of reviews that they see online?
Yeah, hugely important these days. I follow lots of the industry surveys, and, I'm always like really surprised by how many reviews couples read. It's huge. Always advising, my clients to make sure those reviews in all the different places are as good as they can be, and that they're being followed through and followed up. So very important.
I love that. It is crazy to me. We'll have clients that'll come and tour the facilities we operate, and they'll grab a review, like a negative review from 2 years ago, and they'll be like, hey, Sally, back in 2022, she had a problem with this. And it's like, whoa, that's crazy. That's 3 years ago. Like, you're thinking about.
Yeah, and I do wonder if that's also a post-pandemic kind of, almost it's extra double checking, like dotting the I's, crossing the T's, obviously making sure that, obviously during that time there was, poor couples caught up in that whole thing as well as businesses. I think there's a little bit more work that has to be done on the trust and on the, are these guys really good? Are they going to deliver? Which wasn't so much of an issue 6 or 7 years ago. So the reviews are really poured through, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. We've talked about systems. We talked about marketing, kind of getting people in the door, even if they have a great space. And something earlier you mentioned was there's a rise in these marketing firms that say, I will bring you X amount of leads. I'm going to drive these leads into your business. Do you have those over in the UK? And do you see that as an effective way of driving business?
Yeah, we do. We've always had lots of we would call them the directory listings, and then so you guys have, don't you? You guys have like The Knot and Wedding Wire, and we have Bride Book and Hitched. So we have slightly different ones. Those have been long established in the wedding market as driving in leads. We also have some newer, what I would call perhaps more the marketing company you were talking about, also sort of bringing in leads in a slightly different way. My experience with all of it is, sometimes it can be volume and sometimes it's just being careful on quality. Overall, I have mixed experiences with clients on some of those platforms. They play a valid place and they drive leads quickly and speedily, not always of the best quality. And then that sort of moves on to converting those leads. And obviously that's the job of the venue to then get that conversion. And some of those leads, some of those leads will convert, but some of them will be very hard work.
Yeah.
So that's
totally
my experience.
I'm glad you brought that up. As I've looked at the venue industry, it seems like depending on how you decide to set up your lead management and lead acquisition, it puts pressure or relieves pressure on one piece of the sales cycle. So if it's leads and you're just driving, you're putting, $6,000 a month, maybe for whatever, however many pounds that is, on driving the leads. So you've got this big pile of leads, 400 or 500 leads per month, but then they're low quality leads. So now all of a sudden it puts pressure on the salesperson and the conversion to like actually turn that into an engaged client. Yeah. So there's pressure there. Instead of putting pressure and constriction on the front part, generating maybe 100 leads, but they're all interested. They've all actually seen the venue. They know, your pricing, et cetera.
Exactly. I mean, this is sort of quite closely tied into the whole point about transparent pricing, actually, because I had the conversation with quite a few venues where I've said to them, guys, you need to be more out there with your pricing. Let's put it out there on the website. Let's just be, it's there, whether it's, got an email address download or whatever, it needs to be easily accessible. And, that will reduce the number of leads in, of course, because obviously people will see the pricing and some of them will go, no way, that's more than our budget. But actually, my argument on it is, but you want the right ones. You want to deal with the right leads, not just a volume of leads. And that's very much, again, the kind of client I serve. They don't have huge teams, so we need to use the teams effectively. Yes, with some automation and making some of that easier, but actually having less leads, but, filtering them through. And, pricing is only one aspect, but it's, that's my mantra is try less and do a good job of conversing rather than having more leads than you know what to do with.
Totally. I think it's kind of a flex sometimes. Like, we got 400 leads, but like you converted 4 of them. Yeah, so
exactly.
Like, are we, and is that good? Do we want to brag on that? Net versus growth.
It is. And I think it's also I have conversations with clients around, in a way, what that does sometimes to the sales team who are doing the work, which can be a little bit soul destroying when you are, if you're not seeing many results because you're actually dealing with leads which aren't necessarily of the best quality. That can actually start to affect the confidence and the self-belief of actually really good people. So it's a balance. Clearly we need leads in and there's lots of mechanisms for that. And, we have to be visible and sometimes some of the platforms allow that visibility quickly, easily and all the rest. But I think it's just important to monitor, isn't it? It's that return on investment and constant review, constant changing. I mean, the industry has definitely changed at super speed in the last 4 years, I would say. It's and I think kind of keeping us all on our toes.
Yeah. You mentioned AI. I think social media obviously did this, but now we've reached this kind of, I think we've reached this place where like everyone has some form of social media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or X or, whatever it is. Obviously Gen Z don't have Facebook. Maybe they just have TikTok and Instagram, or maybe it's Pinterest. But regardless, now that there's AI and everyone is using AI, I mean, I think it's like the 5th most visited site in the world right now. And it's the only one that's seeing double-digit site view growth. And this is just for timestamp May of 2025. I think people, as they use it more, are going to be able to say, hey, plan my wedding in San Diego, California, plan my wedding in, the UK somewhere, right? In London, outside. I want to get married at a, historic manor.
Country barn in, yeah, exactly. Dorset.
Totally.
Like if you're a county in the UK.
There you go, Dorset. And the crazy thing right now is, like, where is all that information coming from? I think the industry right now has not done a great job of putting out really high quality, like, information. I don't think there's been a lot of the same maybe resources publicly available as there are in different sectors, certainly pharmaceuticals, financial, real estate, some of these more developed industries. And so I think there's going to be like this curve of inaccurate information that is slowly getting better and better. But someone's going to come to a wedding venue saying, I have my wedding planned already. And I just want to see if you're going to let me, like, does this venue that is one of the 4 venues style-wise, does this fit in? Are you going to let me do what I want to do based on my ChatGPT plan? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And then of course it could go wrong, couldn't it? It'd be like, no.
No, exactly. This is not practical. You're not doing a wedding here for $12,000.
This is where it's tricky, isn't it? This is the people over, does it actually work in real life? I'm definitely, yeah. We're all on a learning journey, aren't we? That's for sure.
We really are. We really are. Kelly, as we wrap up today, I'm curious, is there something that if you could shout this from the mountaintops to the venue industry, as you work with clients, as you speak, as you put out content, is there kind of some like overarching theme or message that you're really passionate about, that you really feel like people need to know more in this industry?
Do you know what? I think, first of all, I would like to just say how fabulous venue owners, like teams really are, because I'm always hugely privileged by the people I get to work with, and the people I talk to and, have conversations with. And, it's a great business, but it can be a really tough business. So that's the first things first. I think, recognizing a bit of kind of, are we good? So that's the first thing. But in terms of messaging, I think it's actually I believe really strongly, like, investing in people. So really keeping up that, making your best people really valued and appreciated, and continue to invest in that, like, training and development, and really kind of honing in on the people stuff that actually, that the tech can't so easily do kind of yet. And I think, I know recruitment and getting great team and retaining team has been a real challenge in the UK, again, the last few years within the hospitality sector. So I would say just really looking at what makes a great work environment. We know it's not a 9-to-5 in any way, shape or form, but I have some clients really leading the way on that, actually doing some really nice things with their teams. And they've got a fantastic kind of community and really loyal staff. And I would say that's a real key to their success. So I would put that as...
Yeah. Would you be open to sharing like a couple of those key things? Like, what are they doing to stand out in that way?
Yeah. So they make a real effort to... ultimately to arrange kind of gatherings, get-togethers. One of my clients they've just done a charity. We have like the 3 Peaks Challenge in the UK, where you climb our 3 highest mountains in Scotland, north of England, and Wales. And they've done that across 24 hours. You have to do it consistently across 24 hours. So they've done that as a team. You know, they've taken the week out of the venue, and it is the start of wedding season. And okay, there are still a team at the venue because the clients still need serving. But, you know, the owners have invested behind that as a business. You know, for them, that's, you know, part of, they're constantly investing in training. And, you know, this particular team I have in mind have done quite a lot of training with me, which is, you know, okay, yeah, I'm obviously biased there. But yeah, they're also just a very good, they do a lot of things with their supplier partners too. You know, they organize educational things for their, you know, for their florists and cake designers and stylists and what have you. They'll invite them in for a end of season party and arrange guest speakers to help them with their learning. So that's a really kind of, you know, cool thing that they do. And that's not necessarily the norm in, you know, in everywhere that I work. So I think it's really working on the good relationships, whether it be staff or whether it be external team. Yeah.
Yeah. I realize I have one follow-up question, or I'm just going to ask this. Do you, and this might be a tough question to answer because I know you love the industry so much, but I'm just kind of curious. Do you see in the venue industry a mix of people who are in it because they love people, they love experiences, they love kind of like that personal impact? And do you see people who are just in it for the money? And if you had to assign a percentage of people who are in there for impact versus people who are in there for revenue, what percentage of the industry would you say is kind of split along that line?
You mean the venue owners, or do you mean the industry as a whole?
The venue owners.
Okay. The venue owners. I would say we are probably 60-40 in favor of the revenue and the people. So, yeah, 60-40, I would say.
What do you
I would
think
say
is
across the industry, you will find more of the, what I call like the creatives and the, you know, the kind of, as you say, maybe the suppliers will be more the people, less the revenue.
Got it. So the venues tend to be, if you had to assign a larger majority, it would be for the revenue side.
Yeah, for the revenue and commercially minded. And that you know, it has to be, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, you can set up a cake business fairly, you know, without very much investment, you know.
So with that being 60-40, 60-40 split, and obviously, and I'm not assigning value here. I'm just kind of curious as you see motivations and things. 60-40, do you feel like the venues that are focused, that majority slightly of venues that are focused on revenue, do they actually make more money? Or do you see the venues that are focused on impact actually making more money?
That's a really difficult one.
Yeah.
I'm not always party to all of their figures, of course. So not all of that is shared with me. But what I do know is the ones that are only focused on the money, ultimately, if they're not reinvesting. So again, I think it depends what they do with that money. If they're reinvesting that money into the business for it to grow, so they're increasing their facilities, they're making the product better, then I think that continues to do well. As long as, again, I think there's no shortcut for not having, you know, service and team and all of those things. But if they do those things really well, then I think that can thrive. I think the businesses that just take the profits, just continues to take the profits. If they're not reinvesting in their product, then that tends to slip down the other way. And I've seen that happen across, you know, 20 odd years in weddings and places that were very high profile and did very well, but ultimately, you know, it was about taking the money out. And then if you have to continue and evolve in the wedding venue space, I would say, you know, again, the couples are very discerning, very, you know, they know what good looks like, you know, all price points. And you can't get away with doing the same thing, you know, forever and ever. So yeah, that would be my take.
I love that you highlighted that. That's so true. You know, if you're listening or listening to this or watching this, we've personally experienced, a venue owner who we work with on an operations level, who is passionate and interested in improving the space, making the space better. And that leads to success. That leads to booking success. And then we've worked with owners. But with that said, they had to invest first. They had to, and that's tough. That's risky. That's putting real money, thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, even sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars out there. But you create a beautiful, beautiful space. And then our team does a great job with operations and marketing. But if you don't have the space, if you haven't been investing into the space, we have had an owner like that who just wanted to hire us, hoping the operations would fix it. But the venue hadn't changed in a decade. And they did little tiny things, but then things were falling into disrepair all the time. And we couldn't operationally, and even just being nice, we couldn't make up for the fact that the venue was lacking seriously. So yeah, if you're thinking of getting into this industry, it is expensive. It is an expensive industry, but it can be profitable and rewarding.
It is. And I think, venues have to be commercially savvy and commercially minded, because there is always an investment to do it properly. Whether it's to set up, I've had various clients, yes, they have a building, but they have to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds renovating that and making that into an amazing location. And then obviously have to work for several years to pay off loans and make it work, So it's a serious business. But yeah, it's, it does have to have that kind of continual reinvestment and that people angle, as you say, to make it. It's kind of all of it, really. There are no shortcuts. It's my experience of, you have to have the great marketing, the great people, the investment, all of those things, really. I need that magic wand again, don't I?
Yes. Again, pass it on over. As soon as you find it, we'll take it over here. Awesome. Well, Kelly, thank you so much. This has been really fantastic. Learning a little bit more about you, what you do, the industry there in the UK, and it's wonderful that you serve the venue community like this. I think we need more people that are helping kind of pour into our community, creating content, coaching, working with people, because it makes our industry better. So thank you for what you do. And if someone wants to reach out, they want to work with you, they want to ask you some questions or whatever, what's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably through my website. If you go to kelly-chandler.com and there's contact page, there's lots of useful resources on that. And I write lots of blogs with, information and tips for venue owners. And you can connect with me through there. And of course, all my social channels, LinkedIn is probably my go-to, as well as Instagram, of course. So yeah, there we are. But thank you so much, Jonathan. I've thoroughly enjoyed this last, hour. But yeah, it's been about an hour. So yeah, amazing.
Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Thank you very much.
Hey friends, Jonathan here, and I wanted to share about Common Sense Events consulting packages. If you are a venue owner and you're struggling with your marketing, your sales, your operations, or maybe there's just, you're new to the industry and you want to really have a leg up and get a jump start on getting your business going and not make a lot of the mistakes that oftentimes people make, the mistakes that we made, frankly, when we first started, we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. Our team has experience working with over 10 venues all across the United States, doing consulting. We've hosted hundreds and hundreds of weddings at this point, and we know what it takes to be successful. If this sounds interesting to you, we would love to chat with you. You can either reach out by filling out the link in the description of the video or podcast, or you can just email us at venues@cseventservices.com, and we would love to chat with you and see if there's a way that we can serve you. All right, back to the show.